Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this episode today, we are going to be going over the Vaquero, the topic you have all been waiting for, the man, the myth, the legend, the Vaquero. And I just want you all to know that you should like and subscribe, follow me if you are interested in these type of topics. So, without further ado, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to everybody who contributed images for this presentation. So, thank you. Let's jump into the Vaquero. The historical Vaquero really has two influences. One being Spain, which is the flag shown in this picture, and the second being the native to Americas, the Mexicans, otherwise known as Mexico. According to Vaquero Corononce, the Spanish influence largely resided in California when it came to horsemanship and stockmanship practices, supposedly because California represented more of the local Spanish traditions and they were able to keep doing the same things that they were doing before. Meanwhile, the Spanish that lived in Mexico developed their own styles of horsemanship and stockmanship in Texas. They developed it different from California because California was very similar to Spain. Texas, on the other hand, was and still is a very harsh environment in some areas. They had to develop different styles of ropes and equipment and saddles, and their stockmanship very similar to the cowpuncher of today. Both styles of vaqueros come out of the Mexican influence in the American continent. One common misunderstanding of the historical vaquero is that only Mexicans were the vaqueros. This is simply not true. You see, when the Spanish arrived in the New World, they brought all sorts of new practices, and they brought the mission system. Under the mission system, Native Americans and slaves basically worked for the missions and became vaqueros in and of themselves. So the vaquero is Hispanic, the vaquero is Mexican, the vaquero is Native American, black, and white, and anybody who handled cows for somebody under the Mexican government or Spanish government. To be a vaquero is to be a cowboy. This is why the vaquero is so brilliant. Anybody can be a vaquero. If you are a cowboy today, you are technically a vaquero because vaquero means simply cowboy. People today have grown fascinated with the historical vaquero because of their influence on modern day cowboys. The influence of the vaquero is unescapable. The cowpunchers of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, and so forth, and the buckaroos of the ION in Utah and California, they all fall under the influence of the vaqueros of old, the vaqueros that ruled under the rancho system in California, or the vaqueros who ruled under the rancho system in Texas. When the ancestors of modern-day cowboys arrived in vaquero country, they saw what the vaqueros were doing and how they handled their horses and their stock, and they decided to mimic that. This is why the buckaroo is a derivative of the term vaquero, because these cowboys could not say vaquero, so they called it buckaroo. Historians claim that the vaquero's horsemanship was some of the finest the world had ever seen before. The vaquero were excellent horsemen. This, after all, is what they are known for today. In a country where vast distances ruled the day, the vaquero had to refine their horsemanship in order to stay alive. They also had to do this because they needed to ensure that they could handle the wild Orelhanas, or the maverick cows, correctly. They had to be sure of their horse. After all, their horse is how they would survive. The Vaquero came up with ingenious ideas for how to survive brush. They invented the armitas. They also invented tapaderos to protect their feet from trees and brush as they would ride their horses searching for their cows. The Vaquero were quite ingenious with the equipment that they invented. They also had very limited natural resources, so they made a lot of their clothing from the cattle that they herded all day, along with, believe it or not, horses that they would skin for the hide. The Vaquero were also excellent ropers. They used a form of rope called the riata, which is formed from the hide of an animal. It is basically raw hide. And if you ever see a riata, make sure that you have it oiled correctly. And Pat Puckett, he does an excellent demonstration of how to make sure that your old gut line is properly lubricated so that it doesn't snap or break or not throw correctly. And the Vaquero, they had to use this riata because they had no synthetic materials to rope the animals that they were in charge of. It was out of necessity that they used the riata. And of course, covering all of the history of the Vaquero is impossible in one video. So, without further ado, I want to thank you all for sticking it to the end, and I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the American Vaquero, Mexican Vaquero, Hispanic Vaquero, whatever you want to call them. They are native to the Americas. And just make sure you give this video a nice like and subscribe. Thank you. Have a great day. Adios.